Hi and welcome back. At this point we have completely assembled our serving tray. We've glued the four pieces that make the base of the tray together. We have glued the edge strips onto the front and the back to create a little lip to keep things from sliding off of our tray. And then lastly, we have glued the two arched handles and base units to the base of the tray. So we have a completely assembled serving tray. Now I would like to talk about how I will proceed with sanding my serving tray to get it ready for finish. So here we have our serving tray ready to be sanded. We did a good job whenever we glued up our serving tray in that the exposed sides and the joint areas, we don't have excessive glue that was left in place. Now on the bottom of my tray, I do have a little bit of glue, and you can see that here, these little beads of glue that were left there, and that's something that I need to deal with now as I'm sanding my tray. But on the face and on the ends, on the presentation side, I did a good job of cleaning that up. I'm sure you did too. So what do I want to do to sand my tray? Well, the first thing I want to mention is I'm going to be using 120 grit sandpaper. That would be the coarsest that I would go on this aromatic cedar. This is very soft wood. If you've done some of the other possum box projects where maybe we've done a cutting board and we've used some hardwood, we started with 80 grit sandpaper. Well, on this aromatic cedar, we only need to start with 120 or 220. And everything on this basic kit and education kit was relatively close to being in plane, so there shouldn't be much to sand out. As I do all of this sanding, I want to keep in mind that I'm going to sand with the grain of the wood. I'm not going to sand across the grain at any time. That means that when I get to the handles, I will sand in this direction, not this direction. However, on the tray itself, I will sand in this direction, not this direction. So it's going to change because the grain direction changes. So let's begin sanding our board. I'm going to start with the tray itself. And I want to sand such that when I run my fingers across the tray, I won't feel those joints. It'll be a very smooth surface. I also want to pay attention that if I have some areas that do have a little bit of glue, and I do on this joint, I need to take care of that at this time because the glue will not absorb any of the finish. And you'll always see it. So I want to take care of those. If I have knots, the knots, these boards would have been sanded with a coarser sandpaper, so at this point I want to use my finer sandpaper to get the scratch marks out. And keep in mind, as we move to less coarse sandpaper, we are taking scratches out of the finish from the previous sandpaper that we used. Now, I'm going to continue off video sanding my tray with this sandpaper, but now I want to show just briefly what I'm going to do to the handles. So I'm going to sand the arch. I had a little bit of glue on the arch that I wanted to take off. So I'll sand the faces of each arch, and I'll do the same to the underside. And then I want to take and just sand the corner of that arch all the way down to the tray. I want to relieve the edge so that it's not a sharp edge anymore. I'm going to do that to this top edge here on the inside. I'm going to do it to the edge on the outside as well. And I'm going to do it underneath as well on this edge and on this edge over here. So when I go to use my tray, I don't want to have sharp edges or corners anywhere. On these lips, I want to take my sandpaper and I want to sand off that sharp 90-degree edge here on this part of the lip. And I want to do the same thing to the outside edge. On the ends, I want to take this sharp 90-degree edge and I want to bevel it just a little bit, and I'll do that with my sandpaper, sanding with the grain. I'll do the other end. And so I'm going to proceed that way until I get the whole top surface finished. And then I'm going to turn it over with the same grit sandpaper, and I'm going to proceed to do the same thing with the bottom of my tray. Getting the glue joints, any of that beaded glue that comes up. Now on the bottom of my tray, I may have more of a lip on some of these joints, and I'm not going to worry about that on my tray. People will not be looking at the bottom of the tray, they'll be looking at the top of the tray. And so that's where I'm going to focus my attention. But I do want to get this glue off. Whenever we go to finish our tray, we will finish the top and the bottom. Whenever we apply finish to woods, we don't leave one side raw and then only finish the other side. As it absorbs moisture and changes with moisture content in the air, you will then, if you don't finish one side, that side will be more exposed, more prone to moisture, absorbing moisture, and you can end up cupping or warping your boards if you do that. So we're going to finish both sides. Therefore, I need to deal with the glue on both sides and get it ready for that finish. Well, that's all I have for now. I'm going to proceed and continue sanding my serving tray. And the next video, we will talk about filling in knot holes with epoxy and sawdust. One quick word about sanding. Whenever you're sanding with wood, you're creating sawdust and fine dust particles, and those particles can cause problems with your sinuses, and that's why we've included a dust mask in your woodworking kit. So definitely go ahead and wear that. Some of these dust masks, you may feel a little bit uncomfortable at first, but I assure you, especially when you're sanding with some particular woods like cedars or some of the exotic hardwoods, that the dust mask will save you a lot of trouble with your sinuses. Dust can really irritate your sinuses, and it can also cause further problems and damage if you have prolonged exposure to that. So as we continue sanding, I'm going to put my dust mask on, and I encourage you to do the same.